What's the best anchor? Part 2. On the boat 66. Last time we told you about the history of anchors, how they started out as lodestones and then developed to things that had, well, a bit of bite. We also showed you how iron technology brought about anchors that dug in. And then we looked at the size of anchors compared with different boats. We talked about depth and how we measure it and where from in order to put the chain out. We also showed you how modern anchors can turn and dig in and how they outperform anchors of previous designs. We showed you what can happen if you buy a cheap anchor, and of course we did some maths and calculations for the length of chain. If you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch that first. Last time we talked about anchor chain and anchors, and how the weight of the chain enhances the performance of your anchor and that the two work together. You remember that we illustrated a supertanker anchor weighs 0.01% and a yacht anchor weighs 0.2% of their relative mass. Yeah, but what's the best anchor? I can hear you scream. Anchor technology is moving ahead faster than any of us could imagine, and new anchors are bubbling up all the time. So here's my next point. It's not just the anchor. Look at these tables. A 6mm chain weighs 0.8 of a kilo per metre. An 8mm chain is about 1.4 kilos per metre. And a 10mm chain is a massive 2.25 kilos per metre. For those of you who work in Imperial, a kilo is about 2.2 pounds. Sounds like a load of old bilgewater to me. Pounds and kilos, weight's a chain, an anchor's an anchor. So let's do some sums. If we took our previous calculation based on 33 metres, a 6mm chain weighs 26.4 kilos, an 8mm chain weighs 46.2 kilos, and 33 metres of 10mm chain weighs 74.25 kilos. If you look at the maths, between 6mm and 10mm chain, there's 47.85 kilos of difference in weight. In nautical terms, do you know what a spur lash is? I tell you, it's the sound of an anchor hitting the water, or someone falling in. Okay, enough joviality. Let's show you how we do it, how we anchor. So this is an anchorage in southeastern Sicily, where we were a week or two ago, depending on whether you're a Patreon or not. We've come into the anchorage, Borlar's just set their anchor, and we're now scoping out the seabed with our depth sounder and our eyes, of course, with Polaroid glasses to see what the seabed's like. I'm running forward, that's me, kicking the cruising chute out the way, and I'm just untying the anchor from its secondary secure position. I'm now giving Cindy directions, port, or starboard, or forward, or stop the engine, in order to find a piece of seabed that appears to be mainly sand, because sand's the best thing to anchor in. Now, one of the big issues that we see with people anchoring is communication. We use hand signals and quite a bit of shouting, but it normally goes quite well. So we've found a spot where we think there's sand, deep sand between rocks and some of that Paso Doble grass or whatever they call it. Cindy's called out what the depth is of water in total, not what's under the keel. I've let out some chain, obviously with the anchor on, and we're now allowing the boat to just gently drift backwards as I pay out the chain. The idea is to let the anchor roll over while slowly letting out the chain, and then once the anchor's in position and starts to bite, I'll then let out the rest of the chain. Finally, we drive the anchor home by reversing the boat hard for about 30 seconds. Let's show you what it looks like on the chart plotter. So you can see we've come in here, we've done quite a big circuit. If I come round, see our track here, come round, had a good look at the seabed and the depths, and then we went forward, checked the depth in front of us, we know the depth behind us, we've set our point, and now we're starting to do that pivot around the anchor. At 45 metres from Dean, 70 from Borala, 63 from Eternity, so that's good. And the last thing will be the ball. Fenders are out. Remember what we said before about anchor chain and fenders having two things in common? They're completely useless if they're left in the locker. So always put as much anchor chain out as you can. Put your fenders out. Doesn't hurt. And always use your day shapes, your anchor ball, and of course at night you need to make sure your anchor light's on. So we've been sitting here half an hour now, and you can see this is our original point where we dropped, and we've scribed the classic anchoring arc. That's our scale, 8 metres. Quite happy with that. I'm happy to turn the electronics off now, sit and have a cold beer. Of course tonight we'll put an anchor watch on our mobiles, because both our mobiles have got built-in GPS. There we go. So what happens to that anchor chain when we're scribing that arc? Well, here's a piece of video that will show you. So again, let's look at how a chain and anchor work together to keep you secure. You notice here that the chain comes straight down from the boat, curves round a bit, and then goes off in the direction of the anchor. Now the night before we'd had quite a blow, 20-25 knots. But even during those fairly strong winds, nearly all of the chain has remained on the seabed. Okay, given it's rolled around a bit, but it's still remained predominantly on the sea floor, and that's because of the weight of the chain. Now this area is renowned for bad holding. Is that because people haven't got enough chain out, or is it because they haven't got the right sort of anchor? The seabed here is covered in a relatively thin layer of sand. Underneath that there's hard rocks, and so you need to find the spot and drive the anchor in. It took us quite a while to get the anchor to bite and hold firm, and you can see that when you look at the anchor. It's ploughed along the surface as the tip has hit the rocks underneath. Now look at this. Again, the chain has remained predominantly on the sea floor, even during that blow when we were rocking and rolling and moving around. So what is the best anchor? Well, we can only talk from experience. Well, we know that most anchors are going to struggle on a seabed like this one. Big, flat rocks, stones, boulders, and the occasional seaweed. Talking of seaweed, this stuff, well, just about every anchor struggles to bite in this. And in many parts of the world, you're not allowed to anchor in it anymore. And the ultimate challenge is a seabed like this. I can't think of an anchor that would bite in that. Most boat suppliers will give you the smallest chain they can get away with, when actually you need bigger chain. And we know that bigger chain is heavier, and it'll enhance the effectiveness of your anchor. If you Google search best anchor, you'll find some of the worst anchors we've had are top rated, and that's probably because there's a commercial interest between both the parties. As well as upsizing your chain, we'd strongly recommend you upsize your anchor. Would we buy another Bruce? Would we buy another CQR? Would we buy another Danforth? And would we buy another Lumar Delta? Are we happy with our Manson Supreme? And would we buy another one? At this point I say there is no commercial connection between us and Manson. So does that make it the best anchor? Well, the answer is no. It's the best we've had. David swears by his Mantis. And Phil loves his Rocknut. And Dean's just upgraded to a Spade and he loves it. So are they the best? Well, the answer is no, they're not. Look, it's all about technology and what's available at the time, and having something big enough and strong enough to hold your chain in place. So we've heard a lot of people raving about this, the Ultra. And we've also heard people raving about this, the new Rockner, the Vulcan. And even Manson has a new anchor out, which we haven't tried. So we can't tell you which one's best because we haven't tried it, and at the end of the day, it's opinion. If you use hairy string instead of chain, well, none of them are any good. But providing you've got the right scope of chain out and it's the right size chain, a modern anchor's going to be 100 times or 1,000 times better than something that's out of date. Much better than something that was designed 1,000 years ago. So, here's how not to do it. I've had to turn the sound down because there was a bit of swearing and a lot of wind. But 30 knot gusts we were getting, constant 25, 28 knots, everybody's 50, 60, 70 metres apart. And what does the French guy do? He comes and anchors, and if you look, there's not even a boat length between us. Look at all the space there is everywhere else. Where does he go? Yep, there. Now the water's quite shallow at about 3 metres. But because the wind was so strong, I'd got 40 metres of chain out, as had everybody else. How much does he put out? About 20. After I'd quietly and politely asked him to move, he lifted his anchor and it was full of weed. Yeah, he'd anchored right in a weed patch. At exactly the time I was trying to do the voiceovers for this video. So what is the best anchor? It's the one that's deployed properly, with good chain, in the right place. And that depends on you. Sail safe.